My father left my sister, a $950K home, me a broken shack. Then I uncovered the truth behind it. By Maya Johnson. Chapter 1. The Reading. The lawyer's voice droned on like a broken air conditioner, but I stopped listening after the words $950,000 and Jennifer. My sister Jennifer. Not me. Never me. I sat in that mahogany-paneled office, my hands gripping the worn leather of my purse so tight my knuckles had gone white. The smell of old books and expensive cologne filled the air, making me feel smaller than I already did in my Target dress among all this luxury. Jennifer sat across from me, her designer heels tapping against the Persian rug, trying to look surprised, but I caught that little smirk. She knew. Somehow, she'd always known. And to my daughter Maya, the lawyer continued, his glasses sliding down his nose, I leave the property at 1247 Elm Street. Property. What a joke. That wasn't property. That was a condemned building waiting to happen. A shack that should have been torn down 20 years ago, with holes in the roof big enough to see the stars through and floorboards that creaked like dying animals. But here's what I didn't know then. Sitting in that chair, feeling like the universe had played its cruelest joke on me, that broken-down shack was about to become the key to everything, every family secret, every lie, every reason why Daddy had treated us so differently for 50 years. If I had known what I was about to discover, I might have run out of that office right then and there. Some truths are too big, too ugly, too life-changing to bear, but I didn't know. So I signed the papers with shaking hands, took the rusty keys to my inheritance, and walked out into the Atlanta heat with my heart breaking and my bank account still empty. 3 months later, I'd uncover something that would make that $950K house look like pocket change, something that would turn my entire world upside down and make me question everything I thought I knew about family, love, and the price of keeping secrets. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, the day my father died and I learned just how little I meant to him, or so I thought. Chapter 2. The golden child growing up, Jennifer was always the golden child. If life were a movie, she'd be the star and I'd be the extra in the background, maybe not even credited. Daddy's face would light up whenever she walked into a room, like someone had just plugged in a Christmas tree. When I walked in, the lights seemed to dim. Jennifer had Mama's fair skin and those green eyes that caught the light just right. She was the kind of beautiful that made people stop talking when she passed by. I got Daddy's darker complexion and his stubborn chin, which Mama always said made me look too serious and intimidating. Jennifer got piano lessons, dance classes, and a car for her 16th birthday. I got a job at the local diner to help pay for groceries. Maya's got more sense than beauty, Daddy would say, like it was some kind of consolation prize. She'll do just fine. Just fine. That was me in 2 words. Jennifer was extraordinary. I was just fine. In college, Jennifer studied art history at Emory while living in a sorority house that looked like a palace. I went to Georgia State on a partial scholarship and worked 30 hours a week at a bookstore to cover what the scholarship didn't. When she graduated, Daddy helped her open an art gallery in Buckhead. When I graduated with a degree in social work, he gave me a handshake and said he was proud. Jennifer married Richard, a lawyer whose family had money going back to before the Civil War. Their wedding cost more than most people's houses, and Daddy walked her down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. I married Marcus, a teacher who loved kids and made me laugh until my stomach hurt. We had our ceremony in Mama's backyard with folding chairs and homemade decorations. Daddy gave a nice toast, but he kept checking his watch. When Jennifer couldn't have kids, Daddy mourned like it was a family tragedy. When I had 3 miscarriages in 5 years, he patted my shoulder and said, "God has his reasons." I spent 50 years watching my sister be chosen for love, for attention, for investment, for the kind of care that made you feel valuable in this world. I was the backup plan, the reliable one, the one who'd be just fine no matter what life threw at her. So when that lawyer read Daddy's will and Jennifer inherited a house worth nearly $1 million, while I got a shack that wasn't worth the land it sat on, I wasn't surprised. I was devastated, but I wasn't surprised. What I didn't know was that Daddy had given me exactly what I needed to uncover the truth. That broken-down shack was going to be my inheritance in ways I never could have imagined. Chapter 3. The Shack. The first time I saw my inheritance up close, I sat in my 15-year-old Honda Civic and cried for 20 minutes. Not pretty tears, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs that left my mascara running down my cheeks like black rivers. 12:47. Elm Street sat at the end of a dead-end road like a forgotten punctuation mark. The house, and I use that term loosely, was a small wooden structure that might have been painted white once upon a time. Now it was the color of neglect, with boards missing from the siding and a front porch that sagged like an old woman's back. The roof had more holes than shingles, and weeds had grown up through the floorboards so tall they peeked out the windows like unwelcome visitors. A rusty mailbox hung at a drunken angle, and the front steps had rotted away completely, leaving just a gap between the porch and the ground. This was what 50 years of being second best had earned me. This monument to disappointment. I called Marcus from the car. "Baby," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you need to see this to believe it." "Is it that bad?" "It's worse. I think there might be raccoons living in the kitchen, or maybe it's possums. Something with claws anyway." Marcus had been trying to stay positive about the whole inheritance situation. Bless his heart. He kept saying things like, "At least it's something, and maybe we can fix it up." But when he pulled up in his truck 20 minutes later and saw what I was looking at, his face fell like a stone. "Oh, Maya," he said, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry." "The assessor says the land might be worth $15,000, I told him. "Maybe 20 if we tear down the house and someone's desperate enough to build here." We walked around the property, stepping carefully through the overgrown grass and trying to avoid the broken bottles and rusty cans scattered everywhere. The backyard was even worse than the front, with an old well that looked like a safety hazard and a shed that had collapsed in on itself. "Your daddy must have had his reasons," Marcus said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. Reasons. Everyone kept talking about reasons, but what reason could justify giving one daughter financial security and the other daughter a tetanus shot waiting to happen? I was about to turn around and leave when something caught my eye. There, half hidden by the weeds growing up around the foundation, was a small window that didn't match the others. While the rest of the house had single-pane windows with peeling paint, this one was newer, double-paned, and it looked like it had been recently installed. "Marcus," I said, pointing, "look at that window." He squinted in the afternoon sun. "Huh, that's odd." We walked over to get a better look. The window was clean, which was strange considering everything else about the house was covered in years of dirt and grime. And when I pressed my face to the glass, I could see that the room inside was different too. While the rest of the house was clearly abandoned and falling apart, this room looked maintained. "I think we need to get inside," I said. Marcus looked at the rotted porch and the missing front steps. "How exactly do you propose we do that?" I held up the rusty keys the lawyer had given me, very carefully. Chapter 4. The Discovery. Getting into that house was like performing surgery with a sledgehammer. The front door was so warped it took both Marcus and me pushing with all our weight to get it open, and when we finally managed it, the smell that hit us nearly knocked us backward. Mold. Rot. Something that might have been dead animals, and underneath it all, strangely, the faint scent of lemon cleaner. The inside was exactly what you'd expect from the outside. Water damage had stained the walls in abstract patterns that would have been artistic if they weren't so depressing. The floorboards sagged and creaked with every step, and I was genuinely afraid we might fall through into whatever hellscape existed beneath. The front room was empty except for some scattered newspapers from the 1990s and what looked like the remains of a couch that had become a five-star hotel for mice. The kitchen was missing most of its cabinets, and the refrigerator was lying on its side like a fallen soldier. "Maya, maybe we should just call someone to demo this place," Marcus said, covering his nose with his shirt. "But I was thinking about that clean window and the room behind it. Let me just check something first." I picked my way carefully through the debris toward the back of the house, where I'd seen that newer window from outside. There was a door that I'd assumed led to a bedroom or bathroom, but when I tried the knob, it was locked. Not just stuck like the front door, actually locked, with a deadbolt that looked brand new. "This door's been replaced," I called to Marcus. He made his way over, stepping around a hole in the floor that went straight down to the dirt below. "You're right, this is new hardware." I tried the keys the lawyer had given me. The first two didn't fit, but the third one, a shiny brass key that was obviously newer than the others, slid right in. The door opened to reveal a staircase leading down into darkness. Not a bedroom, not a bathroom, a basement that hadn't existed in any of the house plans I'd seen at the county office. "Well," Marcus said, shining his phone's flashlight down the stairs, "that's not ominous at all." The stairs were sturdy, made of newer wood that hadn't been damaged by the moisture and neglect that had destroyed the rest of the house. Someone had built this recently. Someone had been maintaining it. As we made our way down, the smell of lemon cleaner got stronger. At the bottom of the stairs, Marcus's flashlight beam revealed something that made us both stop dead in our tracks. The basement was finished. Not just finished, it was beautiful. Wood-paneled walls, carpeted floors, and track lighting that came on automatically when we reached the bottom step. It was climate-controlled, clean, and completely at odds with the disaster above our heads. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the walls. Every single wall was covered, floor to ceiling with photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And they were all of me. Chapter 5, The Wall of Maya. I thought I was hallucinating. That had to be it. The stress of the inheritance, the smell of mold, the shock of finding this hidden room. It had all combined to make me lose my grip on reality. Because there was no way those walls were covered with pictures of my entire life. But Marcus saw it too. "Maya," he whispered, his flashlight beam moving slowly across the photographs. "What is this?" There I was as a baby, sleeping in a crib I didn't remember. There I was taking my first steps in a backyard that wasn't ours. Me on my first day of school, clutching a lunchbox and looking terrified. Me at my high school graduation, wearing the blue dress I'd saved up for months to buy. The pictures weren't just from special occasions. There were photos of me walking to the bus stop, sitting in the library, studying, working at the bookstore during college. Someone had been documenting my entire life, and I had never known. "This is insane," Marcus said, moving closer to examine the photographs. "Maya, some of these are recent. Look." He was pointing to a section of the wall where the pictures showed me from the last few years. Me grocery shopping at the Kroger on Ponce. Me having lunch with my friend Sarah at our favorite cafe. Me visiting Mama's grave on the anniversary of her death, something I'd never told anyone I did. Someone had been watching me, following me, taking pictures of me for decades. But who? I walked along the wall, studying the photographs more carefully. They were all professionally taken, with good lighting and composition, not creepy stalker photos, but the kind of pictures you'd see in a family album, loving pictures, proud pictures. And then I saw something that made my legs give out. In the corner, in a place of honor, was a framed photograph of me holding my college diploma. Next to it was the actual diploma, the one I thought I'd lost in my apartment fire 10 years ago, the one I'd cried over because it represented 4 years of struggle and sacrifice. It wasn't lost. It was here, carefully preserved behind glass, like a precious artifact. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "come look at this." He hurried over to where I was standing. Next to my diploma were other things I thought I'd lost over the years. My first grade reading award, a paper I'd written in high school about civil rights that had won a contest, a letter I'd gotten from the mayor thanking me for my volunteer work after Hurricane Katrina. All of it was here. All of it had been saved. "Your father," Marcus said slowly. "It had to be your father." I shook my head. Daddy barely paid attention to me when I was right in front of him. Why would he? But even as I said it, I was remembering things. How Daddy always seemed to know when I'd had a particularly hard day, even when I hadn't told him. How he'd sometimes show up at places I'd be, the grocery store, the gas station, and act surprised to see me. How he'd ask specific questions about my work or my life that suggested he knew more than I'd told him. I'd always thought it was coincidence, or maybe that Marcus had been talking to him more than I realized. But this was something else entirely. In the center of the room was a desk with a computer that looked modern and expensive. Next to it was a filing cabinet with 4 drawers, each labeled with a different decade of my life. "Maya," Marcus said, his voice strange, "I think you need to sit down." "Why?" He was looking at something on the desk, a leather journal that was open to a page covered in familiar handwriting, my father's handwriting, because I think this is going to change everything. Chapter 6. The journal, My Dearest Maya. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you've discovered my secret. I hope you can forgive an old man his deception, but I had my reasons. I always had my reasons, even when they broke my heart. You were never second best, baby girl. You were always first. You were always the one I was most proud of, most worried about, most desperate to protect. But I couldn't show it. God help me, I couldn't show it, and I know that hurt you in ways I can never repair. Let me explain. I sat in the chair at Daddy's desk, Marcus standing behind me with his hands on my shoulders, as I read words that turned my entire understanding of my life upside down. Your mother and I tried for years to have children before Jennifer came along. When she was born, we thought we were the luckiest people in the world. But Jennifer was born with complications that the doctors said might affect her ability to cope with stress and disappointment. They said she would need extra support, extra attention, extra reassurance to thrive. 3 years later, you came into our lives like a miracle. You were healthy, strong, brilliant, everything we dreamed of in a child. But the doctors warned us that if Jennifer felt displaced or less loved, it could trigger serious problems. They said she might hurt herself. They said she might not survive it. So we made a choice. A terrible choice that I've regretted every day since. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the journal. Marcus took it from me and continued reading aloud. We decided to let Jennifer believe she was the favored child, while making sure you knew you were loved in private ways. I thought if I could just keep you both safe until you were grown, everything would work out. I thought I could make it up to you later. But Jennifer's condition got worse as she got older, not better. The jealousy, the need for constant validation, the way she would manipulate situations to get attention, it became our whole life. Every family dinner, every holiday, every milestone became about managing Jennifer's emotions and keeping her stable. I watched you grow up strong and independent despite our neglect. Maybe because of it, you developed resilience, compassion, and integrity that Jennifer never had to learn. You became everything I hoped you would be, and I was so proud I could barely contain it. But I couldn't tell you. Every time I wanted to pull you aside and explain, Jennifer would have another crisis, another breakdown, another threat to hurt herself if she wasn't getting enough attention. So I found other ways to show my love. I followed you. Not in a creepy way, I hope, but in a protective way. I documented your achievements because I was bursting with pride and had no other outlet for it. I saved everything because every moment of your life was precious to me. When you graduated college, I wanted to throw you the biggest party in Atlanta. When you married Marcus, I wanted to walk you down the aisle like you were a queen. When you had those miscarriages, I wanted to hold you and cry with you and tell you that your pain was my pain. But Jennifer was always there, always needing, always threatening to fall apart if the spotlight shifted away from her for even a moment. Marcus stopped reading and looked down at me. Maya, there's more. I know this doesn't excuse what I did. I know it doesn't repair 50 years of feeling second best, but I need you to know that you were never second. You were always first in my heart, even when I couldn't show it. Jennifer is sick, Maya, really sick. The house I left her looks valuable, but it's mortgaged to the hilt. She owes more on it than it's worth, and she has debts you don't know about. The inheritance will barely keep her afloat, and only if she's careful with money, something she's never learned to do. But you, my strong, capable daughter, you get the real treasure. This house, this broken-down shack, sits on land that's about to become very, very valuable. The city is planning a development project that will break ground next year. They'll pay top dollar for this property, more than Jennifer's house is worth, maybe much more. But more than that, you get the truth. You get to know that you were always the child I was most proud of, most impressed by, most grateful for. You get to know that I spent 50 years documenting your life because I couldn't publicly celebrate it. You get to know that you were always enough. You were always more than enough. You were everything. The journal fell from Marcus's hands as I doubled over, sobbing. 50 years of pain was pouring out of me. 50 years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't worthy of my father's love. But underneath the pain was something else, something I'd never felt before. Relief. Chapter 7, The Revelation. I spent the next 3 hours in that basement, going through every photograph, every saved memento, every file folder of my life. There were report cards I didn't know Daddy had copies of, newspaper clippings from when I'd volunteered at the homeless shelter, even a video recording of me giving a speech at a community meeting about affordable housing. In one file, I found copies of every letter of recommendation I'd ever received, including ones from jobs I'd had 20 years ago. In another, there were printouts of emails he'd written to teachers, coaches, and employers, praising my work and character. He'd been my invisible advocate my entire life, working behind the scenes to support me while maintaining the fiction that Jennifer was his priority. Marcus found a folder labeled Maya's Future that contained research about the city development project Daddy had mentioned in his letter. He was right. The land my shack sat on was going to be worth a fortune. The city was planning a mixed-use development with shops, restaurants, and luxury condos. Properties in the area were being bought up for 3 to 4 times their assessed value. Maya, Marcus said, looking at the development plans, this is going to be worth at least $2 million, maybe more. But the money wasn't even the most important discovery. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Jennifer that made everything click into place. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, hospital stays, police reports from suicide attempts that had been covered up and kept quiet. My sister hadn't just been the golden child. She'd been a child in crisis, and my parents had spent their entire marriage trying to keep her alive. The records went back to when Jennifer was 5 years old, diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, and what the doctors called narcissistic personality disorder with self-harm tendencies. The medical reports painted a picture of a child who couldn't handle disappointment, who would fly into rages when she wasn't the center of attention, who had been hospitalized multiple times for suicide attempts that were triggered by feeling unloved or unimportant. There were letters from therapists recommending that Jennifer receive constant positive reinforcement and that any siblings be coached to avoid competing for parental attention. There were school reports about Jennifer's violent outbursts when other children got praise she didn't receive. There were police reports about domestic disturbances when Jennifer would threaten to hurt herself if she didn't get her way. My parents hadn't been playing favorites. They'd been trying to keep their mentally ill daughter alive, and they'd sacrificed my emotional well-being to do it. I found a letter Daddy had written to one of Jennifer's doctors when I was in high school. Maya is the strongest person I know, but I worry about the price she's paying for our situation. She's learned to expect less, to ask for less, to be grateful for scraps of attention. She's becoming invisible in her own family, and it's killing me. But every time we try to give her more, Jennifer has an episode that lands her in the hospital. I don't know how to save them both. Another letter written when I was in college, Maya got a full scholarship to Georgia State. And I couldn't even celebrate with her properly because Jennifer was jealous and threatening to drop out of Emory. I had to pretend it wasn't a big deal, but it's the proudest I've ever been of anyone in my life. She did that all by herself, with no help from us, while we were pouring everything we had into keeping Jennifer stable. How do I have two daughters who are so different? One who needs everything and one who needs nothing but deserves everything. By the time I finished reading, I understood. I finally understood everything. My parents hadn't loved Jennifer more. They'd been held hostage by her illness, forced to choose between my happiness and her survival, and they'd chosen to keep her alive even if it meant emotionally neglecting me. It was a terrible choice, an impossible choice, but it was love. Complicated, messy, heartbreaking love. Chapter 8. Confronting the Truth. I left that basement feeling like I'd been turned inside out. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my childhood, my worth, all of it had been rewritten in the space of a few hours. Marcus drove me home in silence, both of us trying to process what we'd discovered. When we got to our apartment, I sat on our couch and stared at the wall, trying to figure out what to do with 50 years of anger that suddenly had nowhere to go. "Are you going to tell Jennifer?" Marcus asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Did my sister know about Daddy's secret documentation of my life? Did she know about the real value of the land I'd inherited? Did she know that her inheritance came with debts that would eat up most of its value? Did she know that she'd been mentally ill her entire life and that our parents had structured our whole family around managing her condition? I thought about all the times Jennifer had smirked when I didn't get something she got. All the times she'd made little comments about how I was the practical one while she was the special one. All the ways she'd rubbed her privileged position in my face, even as adults. If she knew the truth, if she understood that she'd gotten extra attention because she was sick, not because she was better, how would she handle it? Would it trigger another breakdown? Would she hurt herself? And honestly, part of me didn't care. Part of me wanted her to know that she hadn't been chosen because she was more valuable. She'd been chosen because she was more fragile. But the bigger part of me, the part that had been shaped by 50 years of putting other people's needs first, knew I couldn't do that to her. "I don't know," I told Marcus. "I need to think about it." What I did know was that I needed to see Jennifer. I needed to look at her with this new understanding and figure out what our relationship was going to be going forward, because everything had changed. The entire foundation of our family dynamic had been revealed as an elaborate performance designed to keep one person stable, and that person wasn't me. I called Jennifer the next morning. "Maya," she answered, and I could hear the forced cheerfulness in her voice. "How are you dealing with Daddy's interesting choices about the will?" Interesting choices. Like my inheritance was some kind of joke. "I'm fine, Jen. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. There are some things I'd like to talk about." There was a pause. "What kind of things?" "Family things. Daddy things. I have some questions." "Well, I suppose I could spare an hour. You know how busy I am with settling the estate and everything." The estate. Right. The estate where she'd gotten a house worth nearly $1 million and I'd gotten a shack with raccoons in the kitchen. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Virginia Highland, one of those trendy places where Jennifer liked to be seen. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a table by the window, perfectly put together in a way that I'd never been able to achieve. She hugged me when I approached, but it felt performative. It had always felt performative, I realize now. "So," she said, after we'd ordered our drinks, "what's this about?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and tried to see the sick child instead of the privileged princess. It was hard. 50 years of resentment doesn't just evaporate because you understand its source. I've been going through some of Daddy's things, I said carefully, and I'm starting to understand some things about our family that I didn't understand before. Jennifer's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the way her face went pale. What kind of things? Things about why you and I were treated so differently growing up. Things about decisions Mama and Daddy made that maybe weren't about favoritism. She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her latte with more focus than it required. Maya, I don't know what you think you found, but I found the basement, Jen. The spoon clattered against the side of her cup. What basement? The basement under the shack Daddy left me, the one filled with 50 years of documentation of my life. The one with your medical records in it. Jennifer's hands started shaking. You had no right to go through private medical records. So you knew? You knew about the basement. About what Daddy was doing? She looked out the window, and for the first time in our adult lives, I saw my sister without her mask on. She looked tired, scared, fragile in a way that had nothing to do with beauty. I found it about 5 years ago, she said quietly, when Daddy had his first heart attack and I went to check on all his properties. And you didn't tell me? Tell you what? That Daddy was obsessed with you? That he spent more time thinking about you than he ever spent with me, even though I was supposed to be his favorite? Her voice was bitter now and getting louder. That the whole time I thought I was winning some competition, he was actually documenting how much better you were than me. People at nearby tables were starting to stare. Jennifer noticed and lowered her voice, but the pain in it was unmistakable. Do you know what it's like to find out that your entire life has been a lie? That the only reason your parents paid attention to you was because they were afraid you'd kill yourself if they didn't? So she did know. She knew everything. How long have you known about your diagnosis? I asked. Since I was 18. I found my medical records when I was looking for my birth certificate to apply for college. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out, the golden child was just the broken child who needed more glue to hold her together. We sat in silence for a while, two middle-aged women finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in their lives. I'm sorry, I said finally. She looked surprised. For what? For hating you for so long. For being jealous of something that was never really what I thought it was. Jennifer wiped her eyes carefully, trying not to smudge her makeup. I'm sorry, too. For letting you think it was about you not being good enough. For enjoying it when you felt small. I knew it was wrong, but it was the only thing that made me feel normal. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, she said. I honestly don't know. Chapter 9. The Choice. Over the next few weeks, I learned more about Jennifer's situation than I'd known in 50 years of being her sister. Her marriage to Richard was falling apart. Had been falling apart for years. The art gallery was hemorrhaging money and would probably have to close. She was taking medication for depression and anxiety, but it was a constant struggle to stay balanced. And the house, the beautiful, expensive house that I'd been so jealous of, was indeed mortgaged beyond its value. Jennifer owed more than it was worth, and the monthly payments were more than she could afford on her gallery income. Meanwhile, the city development project was moving forward faster than even Daddy had anticipated. I'd been contacted by 3 different developers interested in buying my property. The latest offer was for $2.8 million. $2.8 million for a shack with raccoons. Marcus and I talked about it every night. What we would do with that kind of money. How it would change our lives. We could pay off our apartment, buy a house, travel, retire early. We could do all the things we'd never been able to afford on our social worker and teacher salaries. But every time I imagined signing those papers, I thought about Jennifer, about the scared look in her eyes when she talked about losing the gallery, about the way she'd admitted that she'd never learned to cope with disappointment because our parents had protected her from it her entire life, about the fact that she was still my sister, even if our relationship had been built on a foundation of lies and medical necessity. "You know what you want to do," Marcus said one night as we sat in bed, the development contract spread out between us. "Do I?" "Maya, you've spent your whole life taking care of other people. It's who you are. You can't change that now, even if you wanted to." He was right. I was 50 years old, and I'd never once made a major decision based purely on what was best for me. I'd chosen social work because I wanted to help people. I'd married Marcus because he was kind, not because he was rich. I'd spent my career working with families in crisis, helping them find ways to stay together despite impossible circumstances. That's who I was. It's who I'd always been. But this time, I was going to do it differently. This time, I was going to help my sister with full knowledge of what I was doing and why. Not out of some sense of obligation or second-class status, but out of choice. Out of love that was finally based on truth. I called Jennifer and asked her to meet me at Daddy's old house, her house now. When she answered the door, she looked like she hadn't been sleeping. "Maya," she said, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you. Can I come in?" We sat in her pristine living room, surrounded by the art and expensive furniture that had always made me feel inadequate. Now I just saw them as props in a performance that had cost both of us our authentic relationship with each other. "I have a proposal," I said. "What kind of proposal?" "The developers want to buy my land for $2.8 million. Jennifer's face went through several expressions: surprise, envy, calculation, and finally, resignation. That's wonderful for you. I want to split it with you." She blinked. "What?" "Half and half, $1.4 million each. You can pay off this house and have enough left over to start fresh. Maybe somewhere that doesn't carry so much baggage for both of us." "Maya, I can't." "Yes, you can. But I have conditions." She waited. "You have to get help, real help. Therapy, medication, whatever it takes. And you have to be honest with me about what you need and what you're struggling with. No more pretending everything is perfect. No more manipulation or games or making me feel small to make yourself feel big." Jennifer was crying now. Not the careful tears that protected her makeup, but real sobs that shook her shoulders. "Why?" she asked. "After everything, why would you do this?" "Because Daddy was right about one thing. We're family. And because I finally understand that you weren't my rival. You were just another casualty of an impossible situation. But mainly because this is who I choose to be. For 50 years, I let other people's choices define me. I let your illness and Mama and Daddy's fear control how I saw myself. But I'm done with that. I'm choosing to be generous because I want to be generous, not because anyone expects me to be." Jennifer looked up at me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "What if I mess it up? What if I can't change?" "Then you mess it up. But you'll mess it up with $1.4 million and a sister who finally knows the truth about both of us." Chapter 10. New Foundations. The paperwork took 3 months to complete. Selling the land, splitting the money, setting up new bank accounts, and helping Jennifer pay off her debts and put her house on the market. During that time, we talked more than we had in our entire adult lives. I learned that Jennifer had been suicidal as recently as 2 years ago, when the gallery started failing and Richard began talking about divorce. I learned that she'd been in therapy on and off since college, but had never been honest with any therapist about the extent of her problems because she was afraid of being hospitalized again. I learned that she'd always known, on some level, that our parents' favoritism wasn't really about love. It was about fear. But knowing it intellectually and accepting it emotionally were two different things. I spent so many years trying to live up to being the chosen one, she told me one afternoon as we sat in the empty gallery packing up the last of her inventory. I thought if I was perfect enough, beautiful enough, successful enough, it would justify all the attention I got. I thought it would make it real. And when it didn't work, I got angry at you, at Mama and Daddy, at the world, but mostly at myself for not being worth what everyone was sacrificing for me. Jennifer had started seeing a new therapist, one who specialized in narcissistic personality disorder and family trauma. She was on medication that seemed to be working better than anything she'd tried before. She'd joined a support group for people with mental illness. Most importantly, she'd started talking to me like I was a person instead of a threat. "I don't know how to have a normal sister relationship," she admitted one day. "I don't know how to be happy for you without feeling like it takes something away from me." "I don't know how to have a normal sister relationship either," I said. "I don't know how to trust that you care about me without wondering what you want from me. So we'll figure it out together." It wasn't magic. We didn't suddenly become best friends or erase 50 years of dysfunction overnight. There were still moments when Jennifer would slip into her old patterns, needing to be the center of attention, getting jealous when Marcus and I talked about our plans for the future, making little comments designed to make me feel smaller. But now, when it happened, she caught herself, and when she didn't catch herself, I called her on it. And slowly, painfully, we started building something that looked like an actual relationship. Chapter 11. What Daddy Really Left Us. 6 months after the sale of the land, Marcus and I bought a modest house in a neighborhood we'd always dreamed of living in. Nothing fancy. Just a 3-bedroom ranch with a big backyard and good schools nearby in case we ever decided to foster children like we'd talked about for years. Jennifer used her share of the money to pay off all her debts and buy a small condo near Emory, where she was taking art therapy classes and volunteering at a mental health center. She was learning to help other people with the same struggles she'd faced, and for the first time in her life, she seemed to have a sense of purpose that wasn't based on being admired or envied. The real gift Daddy had left us, I realized, wasn't the money, it was the truth. For 50 years, we'd all been trapped in a lie that hurt everyone involved. Jennifer had been trapped in the role of the perfect golden child, constantly performing and never able to admit weakness. I'd been trapped in the role of the strong, independent one who didn't need anything from anyone. Mama and Daddy had been trapped in an impossible situation, trying to keep one daughter alive while slowly killing the other's spirit. The truth had set us free to be who we actually were, instead of who we thought we were supposed to be. Jennifer was learning to be vulnerable and honest about her struggles. I was learning to accept love and support without feeling like I had to earn it. We were both learning that we could care about each other without it being a competition. We started having dinner together once a month. Nothing fancy, just takeout in one of our homes. Talking about our lives without the performance and pretense that had defined our relationship for so long. "Do you think Daddy knew?" Jennifer asked one evening as we sat on my new back porch, watching the sunset. "Do you think he knew that leaving you the land would lead to all of this?" I thought about it, about the careful way he'd documented my life, saving every achievement he couldn't publicly celebrate, about the medical files he'd kept as if he was preparing evidence for a case he might someday have to make, about the timing of the development project, which he'd researched extensively. "I think he hoped," I said. "I think he spent 50 years trying to figure out how to fix what the situation had broken, and this was his best guess." "Do you forgive him?" Another hard question. Did I forgive a man who had loved me deeply but never been able to show it? Who had sacrificed my emotional well-being to keep my sister alive? Who had made an impossible choice in an impossible situation? "I'm working on it," I said. "Some days I do. Some days I'm still angry about all the years I felt worthless, but I'm working on it." "Me too," Jennifer said quietly. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, something that never would have been possible before. Two sisters, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in their lives. Chapter 12. The Real Inheritance. A year later, Marcus and I were approved to be foster parents. Our first placement was a sibling pair, 8-year-old Damon and 6-year-old Keisha, whose parents were in treatment for addiction. The kids had been bounced around the system for months, and they came to us angry, scared, and convinced that every adult in their lives would eventually disappoint them. They reminded me of Jennifer and me, in a way. 2 children caught in circumstances beyond their control. Their relationship with each other shaped by trauma and the adult's inability to give them what they needed. But this time, we could do better. The most important thing, I told Marcus as we prepared for their arrival, is that they both know they're wanted, not one more than the other. Not one because he's easier or she's prettier, both of them equally unconditionally. It wasn't easy. Damon had behavioral problems and struggled in school. Keisha was too quiet, too eager to please, too quick to make herself invisible when her brother was acting out. I recognized that dynamic immediately. The difficult child who demands attention and the easy child who learns not to ask for it. But we were determined not to repeat the patterns that had shaped our own childhoods. When Damon had a meltdown, we addressed his behavior without making Keisha feel responsible for managing his emotions. When Keisha tried to fade into the background, we gently brought her forward without triggering Damon's jealousy. It was exhausting. It required constant vigilance and communication between Marcus and me. But slowly, both children began to relax. They began to trust that they didn't have to compete for our attention or approval. Jennifer, to my surprise, became an important part of their lives. She understood, in a way that I was still learning, what it felt like to be the child whose needs shaped the entire family dynamic. She could talk to Damon about his anger and his fear in ways that reached him when Marcus and I couldn't. And she could see Keisha's tendency to disappear and gently encourage her to take up space, to have opinions, to believe that she mattered. "You're good at this," I told her one afternoon as we watched her help Keisha with a school project. "I'm good at seeing myself," she said, "in both of them. The part of me that demanded everything and the part that got lost in my own demands." 6 months after Damon and Keisha came to live with us, their caseworker asked if we'd be interested in adopting them. Their parents had relapsed and were facing criminal charges. The children needed permanency. Marcus and I didn't hesitate. These were our kids now, in every way that mattered. The adoption hearing was held on a Thursday morning in October. Jennifer took the day off from her volunteer work to be there. As we stood before the judge, promising to love and protect Damon and Keisha for the rest of their lives, I thought about Daddy, about the choice he'd made 50 years ago to sacrifice one child's emotional needs for another child's survival, about how that choice had echoed through generations, shaping Jennifer's ability to love herself and my ability to believe I was worthy of love, but also about how that choice had led us here, to this moment where we could choose differently, where we could break the cycle, where we could give 2 children what Jennifer and I had never had, the security of knowing they were both wanted, both valued, both chosen. After the hearing, we went out for lunch to celebrate. Damon was excited about changing his last name to ours. Keisha was quiet but happy, leaning against my side like she finally belonged somewhere. "Aunt Jennifer," Damon said. They'd started calling her that without any prompting from us. "Are you going to adopt kids too?" Jennifer smiled. "I don't think I'm ready for that yet, sweetheart, but I love being your aunt." "Good," Keisha said firmly, "because we need you. We need you." 4 words that Jennifer had been desperate to hear her entire life, but only from people who chose to need her, not people who were obligated to need her. Looking around that table, at my husband, my children, my sister, I realized that Daddy had given us the greatest inheritance of all. Not money, though that had been life-changing, not property or possessions or status symbols. He'd given us the truth, and the truth had set us free to choose who we wanted to be to each other. Epilogue. 5 years later. I'm writing this story sitting in the garden behind our house, watching Damon teach Keisha how to throw a curveball. They're 13 and 11 now, and they fight like normal siblings, not like children who are afraid one of them will be sent away if they're not perfect. Jennifer lives about 20 minutes away in her condo, which she's decorated with her own paintings instead of expensive art from other people. She's been in a stable relationship for 2 years with a man who knows about her mental health struggles and loves her anyway. She still has bad days, but now she has tools to deal with them and people who support her through them. Marcus and I fostered 3 more children after Damon and Keisha, providing temporary homes while they were reunited with family members. We've learned that love isn't a finite resource. The more you give away, the more you have. The shack that changed everything was torn down to make way for a shopping complex with a Whole Foods, a yoga studio, and a dozen other businesses that cater to the young professionals moving into the new condos. Sometimes I drive by just to look at it and remember. I still have Daddy's journal and all the photographs from the basement. Sometimes I flip through them and marvel at the dedication it must have taken to document a life he couldn't publicly celebrate. Sometimes I'm angry about the waste of it, all that love that was hidden away instead of shared. But mostly, I'm grateful. Because that secret room wasn't just documentation of my life. It was proof that love finds a way, even under impossible circumstances. Even when it can't be spoken or shown or acknowledged, love finds a way to preserve what matters. Daddy couldn't give me his attention while he was alive, but he gave me his truth after he was gone. And that truth changed everything. For me, for Jennifer, for the children we've welcomed into our family, and for the generations that will come after us. The broken shack was never really my inheritance. The real inheritance was understanding that I had always been loved, always been valued, always been enough. I just hadn't been able to see it. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as disappointments. Sometimes what looks like rejection is actually protection. Sometimes the people who seem to love us least are the ones who are fighting the hardest to love us in the only way they know how. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to build the relationships you were meant to have all along. That's the real treasure I found in that broken-down shack on Elm Street. Not money, though that helped. Not property, though that provided security. The real treasure was the truth that set us all free. And that's worth more than any house could ever be.